morning and welcome to Morning Movie News. Today I thought we'd focus on films that haven't quite made it onto our radar yet, but have the potential to do so in a big way, sooner rather than later. Because while it's fun to anticipate the films we're expecting, like Avengers 2, Age of Ultron, Batman vs. Superman, Mockingjay 1 and 2, how interesting is it that Hunger Games as a franchise has reached the level of Marvel and DC and is able to compete on par with those franchises. As you might recall, The Hunger Games Catching Fire domestically was the most successful film of the year and certainly gave these other properties a run for their money worldwide to boot. So the reason I focus on that is because The Hunger Games came out of nowhere. It was a surprise. And I think that that's always fun to see too. Films that surprise us, that we don't expect to do well. Like Frozen, for instance. I remember when I started my Frozen coverage before they really started to advertise the film, a few people at least wondered in the comments why I was putting so much attention on this film, and I sure was gambling that it would do well. My hunch paid off. The film did do very well, ironically so, because I was an early believer in it and I wasn't happy with the result. But at the same time, I am really happy to see Disney enjoy so much success because I'm a fan of the company overall and I want to see Disney Animation succeed. And that was it was a fun ride. It was fun to see that phenomenon, to surf that phenomenon for so long, to see how long we could go. We ended up going about 17 weeks in the top 10 at the box office. And so I think that's a very exciting thing to witness, the birth of a new pop culture phenomenon. So these films today, I don't know if they're going to reach Frozen level, but I think they have certainly the potential to be cult hits. A new Kick-Ass, a new La Femme Nikita, or The Professional. And you'll see why I brought up those films specifically in a moment. But let's start out with the first story of the day, and we're going to talk about The Secret Service. This is a film that comes out in October, and it's basically, the reason I brought up Kick-Ass is it's from Mark Millar. It's based on his comic book, The Secret Service. I don't think it's a hugely successful comic book. Maybe it sells better in the UK, but at this point, I think movie executives have a hard time discerning successful comic books from not successful comic books, and the numbers, even for successful comic books, aren't that big. A comic book is lucky to sell 100,000 copies, which just shows you how small the comic book market is at this point in time. Hopefully it'll grow, but if the comic book movie renaissance doesn't make it grow, I don't know what will. Maybe potentially digital comics. I've switched over to digital, so we'll see, but that's a whole other discussion. As for The Secret Service, this is, so it's Mark Millar's, and it's almost, you could say, the way I would see this pitch going is it's Kick-Ass, kind of the cheekiness of Kick-Ass, the violence of Kick-Ass, the very, potential for a cult hit, really being very meta, yet, embracing the genre, yet really, but going in its face and changing, and I see those elements there, but also at the same time being very, very UK and more for an adult market. Actually, I think it could span the markets because the lead character is a teen or early 20-something character called Eggsy. That'll be played by relative newcomer Taron Egerton. But the thing that's I think will be really exciting, the hook here potentially, is that their lead actor is going to be Colin Firth. Yes, that's right. The Academy Award winner for The King's Speech is doing an action movie. And the reason this is relevant today, right now, I mean, this film comes out in October this year, 2014. That's interesting to see it have to take that release date. I think at another time, another period, it would have come out in early March, as we've been discussing, a time for out-of-the-box blockbusters, potential blockbusters. But it's so crowded these days. Universal, at their CinemaCon panel, said that they felt that studios need to utilize the entire calendar at this point. You're seeing this film try and break out and make a name for itself in October. We'll see if it succeeds. But speaking of CinemaCon, that's the reason this is timely. CinemaCon, every studio is having their presentation for the theater owners. We've discussed Universal in depth. And then also Fox, late last week, had their presentation. And the thing that everybody walked away being very excited about, not just because it played last, but because everyone was excited to how good it looked, apparently, and that was a clip from The Secret Service. It was a surprise. Fox hadn't said they were going to show it. You would think that their X-Men Days of Future Past presentation would steal the show, but it was this clip from The Secret Service. And apparently it was an action sequence where Colin Firth, using an umbrella, totally dominated, and the audience of theater executives mostly went crazy. So I think that's really an interesting thing to hear, and it definitely piques my curiosity about this film at multiple levels. Now let's start out with the fact Matthew Vaughn is directing this. Matthew Vaughn, everyone loves Matthew Vaughn. A lot of people were sorry to see him leave the X-Men franchise after he really did a lot to re-energize it with X-Men First Class. But I think that's really Bryan Singer's franchise. He left it to go make Superman Returns, fair enough, but he's come back, and I think Fox is has reason to be very happy with his work. He's the one who created that franchise and made it such a powerhouse to begin with, and I think that they believe he can bring it back on track. We'll see when X-Men Days of Future Past comes out, but Matthew Vaughn has shown him up at CinemaCon, interestingly enough. But, also Bryan Singer, I think that he's just dedicated his career to making X-Men movies at this point, which, he tried to do something else, it didn't work out, and I think, well, at first he was adverse to the idea of making X-Men movies the rest of his life. Now that he's seen the alternative, he thinks it's a great idea. So, but Matthew Vaughn, he really, I think, wants his own sandbox, so he is teaming up with Mark Millar again, and Jane Goldman, also a frequent collaborator with them, is on scripting duties, and they're going to try and, it seems to me, I'll show you, here's a picture of Colin Firth in costume, and he's clearly referencing the UK Avengers. Now, this is I don't know if you would say they had the title first, but, before the Avengers became a big deal, thanks to Marvel Studios, when people heard the Avengers, they thought of this, iconic television show. And I think you'll notice now, you might have noticed already, that whenever they show the Avengers title now, it's called Avengers Assemble, or Marvel's Avengers. And I'm curious if behind the scenes, the people from behind the UK Avengers might have said, you're infringing on our brand, so you have to make it clear there's a distinction. So I think that's a very interesting kind of behind-the-scenes business story. So I think that Mark Millar, Matthew Vaughn, both from the UK, feel, hey, you know what, let's try and show that we can not only make great dramas and often dominate the Oscars and such with our winners, but make a great action movie. And this is going to be very UK. It's almost kind of like the action-y genre Harry Potter, because J.K. Rowling was really adamant that they only have UK talent in those films. And here, the rumored cameos are, for instance, Michael Caine, David Beckham, Adele, Elton John. We're going to have some American flavor as well. Samuel L. Jackson is the other big, he has an actual role in the film. But also Lady Gaga is rumored to appear, and also Taylor Swift. So this seems like classic Mark Millar, especially when he gets into his own head, Miller world. He likes to reference pop culture. He likes to really be in your face. And so I think he's, and now that he's had so much success, I think he can you'll see more and more of him being true to form, what he really likes to do. And I'm curious if he's spending so much time perhaps on the Secret Service, that's why, even though he's supposed to be shepherding Fox's Marvel properties, they might be having some trouble, all those Fantastic Four rumors, because Mark Millar isn't quite paying attention. He said, thank you for the check. You can use my name if you ever want to defend your stuff, but I'm going to go make my own movies. That's kind of what he did in the comic book world as well. He just decided to do his own stuff, but I think with varying results. He has some pretty good comics sometimes. I forget the name of it. He just had one come out. It's kind of like The Incredibles in space. I'll just look up Miller World, and it has like Gorin is the name of the artist from the Nick Fury miniseries, adult mature audience, comic book. Very good stuff. So Mark Millar can hit the mark, and I think Matthew Vaughn, back and forth as well. And of course, Matthew Vaughn doesn't really stay with anything. He did Kick-Ass, then he bailed on Kick-Ass too. So we'll see. We'll see if they can work their Kick-Ass magic again. But apparently the crowd went wild, so this is something that you should be looking for. The Secret Service could do quite well. And I also want to talk just really quick about Colin Firth. I think it's interesting, there seems to be a trend sometimes when an actor finally wins that Oscar, they go mainstream. I think the most famous case of that is Nicolas Cage. After leaving Las Vegas, he went to his Jerry Bruckheimer period of films. I enjoyed those, so I'm not going to complain. And I think that Nicolas Cage ruined his own career for other reasons than going mainstream. As if anything, he just decided to go into some weird Nicolas Cage place where he made movies that only appealed to him. But as for Colin Firth, not only is he starring in this film, which is going to be an action film, I'll be curious to see if Colin Firth can pull it off. But apparently, based on this clip and how people reacted, he can. But he's also the voice of Paddington Bear. So you're going to be seeing a lot of Colin Firth and kind of, trying to reach out to a demographic that's never really embraced him. And I'll be curious to see if they will. I think it's funny that on Secret Service they'll be able to say Academy Award winner Colin Firth and then have him punch something. I think that'll be great. Or use his umbrella, I guess, and stab it. But I think that they're probably that alone, or knowing, the way Matthew Vaughn and Mark Millar think, are probably very excited about that themselves. But I have some question as to whether Colin Firth can bring in an audience. This trailer for this film would have to be amazing. But we'll see. I don't think Colin Firth has ever really brought in a big audience. He was in the Bridget Jones films, but that was Renee Zellweger. By the way, we had this big discussion with Russell Crowe about Noah, and he was in Man of Steel. If it's not your movie, you don't get credit for the box office, because you didn't bring people in. You have to be one of the lead roles. And Russell Crowe was supporting. And as I argued in the comments, Man of Steel underperformed. So that was the Russell Crowe curse again. But Noah was on track to do quite well. So he didn't give up, and it looks like he stuck it out. All right, so that's the first story of the day, Secret Service, and I'd be curious to how you guys feel about it. It sounds like something you'd want to see. And does it sound like something you think a lot of people would want to see? Do you think this has mainstream appeal? It could do quite well in the UK alone, so that would be interesting. They have a very small box office market, though, so I mean, it would have to do very well in the United States and Asia in order for it to really be, it might have a small budget, but still, you really want to hit your American audience. All right, so let's go on to the second film. I also want to talk about a Luc Besson film, but I'm going to do that third. That's the third story because it goes into the viewer question. So let's take a little detour into a film called Pixels. This just got interesting because Peter Dinklage might star in the film. And I think it's interesting, or co-star. And I think it's great that Peter Dinklage is able to get work. And everyone's having all these articles recently about Lupita Nyong'o. And she won the Oscar, and I was really offended by this. They're like, is there work for dark-skinned actresses? And I was like, that's ridiculous. I mean, are we really talking about skin color in this day and age? And it's a really unfortunate discussion with black women in particular, which I think is horrible, about how lighter skin is better, it's more relatable. It's just an appalling discussion. And I can't believe in 2014, poor Lupita Nyong'o has to have discussions about her skin color, out in the open in public and whether or not she's viable as a movie star. But, that's a whole different story. On to Peter Dinklage. He's doing quite well. He's in X-Men Days of Future Past, obviously, and now it looks like he's going to be in this comedy. And I think I think he's another actor where, he does the station agent, he makes a big splash, but people wonder, are there a lot of roles for a little person? But I think that Peter Dinklage has shown through sheer force of personality and the great gift that is the role of Tyrion Lannister, that there is work for him. And I think he's wonderful on that show, and I think he's getting these roles on the strength of Game of Thrones. I think inarguably, I would actually say, he is the star of that show. He's my favorite character. He's many people's favorite character. And that's why you're seeing him get all this work. So what is this? Now, you might wonder, is he getting good work? We'll see what kind of role he has in Days of Future Past, if it's well done. But this is an Adam Sandler comedy. All right, so it has some big names, and it has a good pedigree. Let's discuss. But it's very much an Adam Sandler film. He's producing it through Happy Madison. He's having a lot of his own problems at the box office. We'll see if he can, by teaming up he's bringing in some old names and new names, we'll see if he can mix it up enough to really score at the box office. But he is in trouble. But Sony still believes him, and they still believe in him, and they're distributing this film. All right, so Pixels. It's based on a short that made the rounds in Hollywood a couple of years ago. It was very, very hot. And it was about video game characters from the 1980s attacking New York City. Now, I hear that and I go, Wreck-It Ralph! It's a fantastic film. This has already been done. But they're going to try and do a live-action kind of version. And so basically, the world comes under threat from video game characters. I'm not sure if the characters are actually real, like it's a comedy, or we're going to go for more of a war game scenario, that Matthew Broderick film from the 1980s, where it's like computer war games. So anyway, the president, because it's an Adam Sandler film, is played by Kevin James. So Kevin James is the president, and he finds that the government has to take on this video game enemy of some kind. So he calls up his old friends from childhood that are, of course, all great gamers, and obviously haven't risen to maybe they have. Maybe they're all doing really well, but I tend to think in an Adam Sandler movie they would not, and they would be like, that's why the president has left them behind. But he's going to call up Adam Sandler, Josh Gad from Frozen, talk about some carryover from that success. Josh Gad is so far the only one really getting anything out of Frozen. He voiced Olaf. And then, of course, Peter Dinklage, and those will be the three friends that Kevin James calls up to help save the world from video games. And Chris Columbus is directing, of course, from Home Alone, and he kick-started the Harry Potter franchise, but because he was surprisingly uninspired in his directing of those first few films, they got rid of him. And of course, I believe Alfonso Cuarón was the first big name that they brought in, and eventually David Yates settled in as the director for that franchise. But Chris Columbus started it, and so it'll be interesting to see how he does here. He's not Adam Sandler's usual director, but I think it's good that Adam Sandler is, reaching out of his comfort zone and his team, which I think perhaps he's become a little too comfortable in. But I think before Peter Dinklage joined this cast, I think Pixels, Click did very well. Click was actually not a bad movie. Adam Sandler's very hit or miss, but we'll see how he does here. But I think having Peter Dinklage join the cast is very smart. Let's hope that Adam Sandler doesn't make him do a lot of horribly rude jokes centered around his height. I think, I don't know if I would put that past Adam Sandler, but we'll see. So what do you think? Would you see Pixels, and do you think this is a good choice for Peter Dinklage? Should he just be taking any roles he can get, especially in a high-profile film like this? And also, would you be even interested in seeing a film like Pixels, considering that Wreck-It Ralph exists and was recent? All right, so that's the second story of the day. The third story is that on later this week, April 2nd, Wednesday, a trailer for Luc Besson's Lucy is going to drop. Now, this is Scarlett Johansson's other big action movie. She's made one outside of the Marvel franchise, and I'm sure when she originally signed on, it was perhaps to show that she could make a Black Widow movie, that it's viable. We'll see if this either strengthens her argument, which has been building a lot of steam with Captain America the Winter Soldier. Surprisingly so. I think it's almost as much the Black Widow's movie as it is Captain America's. But when she originally signed on to make Lucy, I think she didn't have a lot of momentum with the Black Widow film. So she was like, let me show that I can do it somewhere else. With, of course, Luc Besson, the master of female action heroes, Fifth Element, La Femme Nikita, Natalie Portman in The Professional. He's very, very good at what he does of creating these model-esque action heroes. And I'm very curious to see it because I like Scarlett Johansson's work so much in the Avengers films as Black Widow. So the first still came out over the weekend. I think that it's a very interesting thing to see if this will either help or hurt her chances of making a Black Widow film. Luc Besson's film don't usually do that well at the box office, at least here stateside. So she could end up showing that even though she's very liked in the Marvel films, she can't carry a film, and that's the big danger here. So I'm very curious to see this trailer drop. Look for it. I'll put up a trailer review as fast as I can when it drops on Wednesday, April 2nd, but I think it's very exciting, and I think Scarlett Johansson teaming up with Luc Besson is a great idea. The basic concept is that she's a drug mule in the future, but it's sci-fi, so something in the drugs leaks into her system, and she becomes someone who has some kind of superpower. So we'll see what it is. I think it's going to be interesting, and I just want to see Scarlett Johansson succeed in the action genre, because I think she's very good at what she does. So that leads into today's viewer question. This comes from Jimmy Martin. And Jimmy says, Grace, I just want to say that I really like your show and I enjoy watching it each day. Thank you, Jimmy. I really appreciate that. So then Jimmy says, I have a question for you. Who will have their first superheroine movie, Marvel or DC, and who do you think it will be? Well, basically, Jimmy, I think we're in a race here between a Black Widow movie and a Wonder Woman movie. And as I said, I think Black Widow would be the front runner. But two things have, I think, kind of become obstacles for a Black Widow movie. One is this Lucy movie. If it doesn't do well, it comes out very soon. It comes out, I believe, in May. They're dropping a trailer very close to the release date. So if Lucy fails to do well at the box office, I think that would give Marvel a pause and some reason for concern, because it would signal that Scarlett Johansson can't carry a movie. There's not an interest in seeing a movie just with her. So I think she would continue to be a big supporting character in the other movies. So that's what I think would happen if Lucy doesn't work out. So Scarlett Johansson, as I said just a moment ago, could end up being her own worst enemy. The other derailment, the other obstacle is her pregnancy. She's already starting to show. Everybody was talking about that on some of the Captain America, the Winter Soldier red carpets. So the question is, how much will that delay her? And then she has to get back into shape. And so it's already affecting the scheduling and the shooting of Avengers 2. They said they've had to make some changes in the schedule. They're going to have to hide her behind some stuff, use doubles perhaps where they wouldn't have wanted to. But of course, as I discussed when this news first broke about Scarlett Johansson, it's personal versus professional, and this is just what happened. We have to roll with the punches. But I think a casualty could be Black Widow. Whether or not the film will totally be scrapped or just delayed, we'll see. Now, Wonder Woman has been also delayed, and that's because Batman vs. Superman has been pushed back to 2016. But at the rate that Scarlett Johansson is going, as I said, a Wonder Woman film could still potentially beat a Black Widow film to the box office, to theaters. And I think we'll see how Gal Gadot does as Wonder Woman. That's also very crucial, if she's accepted. I've been seeing her Twitter account pushed a lot these days recently, when they recommend who you should follow on Twitter. So I think that Warner Brothers is really trying to build up her fan base. I hope she's working to kind of bulk up and be a more believable Wonder Woman. We'll see what happens. And also there are things beyond her control. How has the role been written for her? How big is it? And how will Zack Snyder shoot it? How skimpy is her costume? I mean, Wonder Woman has to have female viewer support. I think that's one of the big things that's helped Scarlett Johansson is Black Widow. She wears a skin-tight outfit, but as I've said before, it still covers everything. So it leaves something to the imagination. And I think that's a good example of pleasing both women and men. She's fully covered, but it's still skin-tight. So we'll see. So that's what I think it is. I think it boils down to a Wonder Woman movie versus a Black Widow film. And I'm curious, do you have an interest in seeing either of those? Which would you like to see first? If Gal Gadot doesn't work out as Wonder Woman, I think that could be pushed back a very long time, because then you're talking about a bigger problem about DC potentially having to reboot again. Can they even do that? Like, what, a third or fourth time at this point? It's crazy. So that's my answer to your question, Jimmy. Thank you for asking. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in today. And I hope you write down below what you'd like to see covered tomorrow, any questions you might have. And you can also check out some more episodes right now.